Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video here on the Parker Love Sports YouTube channel. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to spend them here with me. Now, in today's video, I'm going over my final 2024 NFL mock draft. As when you guys are watching this, the draft is tomorrow. I'm so excited. It's my favorite event of the year, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are excited as well. If you didn't know, I will be live streaming here on the channel. You need to go and click on my channel icon and go to the lives tab, and you'll see the scheduled stream. And if you want to come and hang out with me, you're more than welcome to. It's gonna be fun to chat to a lot of people. Now, I will say I am a Broncos fan, so in this mock draft, if I did something that you don't think your team should do, or I took a position earlier than you think that your team should take that position and you think you can take someone later, I'm sorry. I'm a Broncos fan. I know a lot about the Broncos, and then I know a lot about a lot of the other teams, but I probably don't know it as well as you do if it's your favorite team. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. I don't speak for all the Broncos fans when I give my opinions on who the Broncos should draft. But, yeah, I like to voice my own opinion. And if you have a different opinion, then let me know in the comment section below. Now, I used to do these a lot, but recently I kind of stopped slowing down, and I've only done one essentially right before the draft. But I used to do a lot of these. I used to do a way too early one a couple days after the previous draft had wrapped up, and then I would do some every 2 weeks throughout the NFL season, throughout the offseason leading up to the draft. I've been slacking. I'm hoping to get back on the full first round video train here next season, but that is neither here nor there. Let us go ahead. Let us jump in to my final, and I guess my only, 2024 NFL mock draft this season for the full first round. Now, I forgot to do this initially, which I feel bad about, but of course, as always, I want to remind you that Jesus is king, and I pray that you give your life to him, as he has got a plan and a purpose for you. And I just truly hope that you accept Jesus with your whole heart and believe that he died on the cross for your sins. Now, a lot of people think that it's how many times we go to church or do these good works or read the Bible, and all those things are good, and we should want to do those things as Christians. The only thing that saves us is the works that Jesus did, and his works alone on the cross, by living the perfect, sin-free life, sacrificing himself on the cross, dying, and being resurrected from the dead 3 days later. Now, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I don't care, because it's an important message to me as a Christian. And so I'm going to continue to share it on any platform that I have, no matter how small or how big. I'm going to continue to share the message because it's important to me. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump in to my 2024 final first round mock draft. And starting off, we have Caleb Williams, of course, going number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears. Now, Caleb Williams is this generational type of quarterback prospect. You know, the last time we had one was Trevor Lawrence. You think of Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, although I don't think he was viewed as that generational prospect. Maybe he was. I obviously wasn't alive back then, but him and Ryan Leaf were the two guys. But you think about Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, those really hyped up guys who we know were going to be the number 1 overall pick, essentially a couple years out from the draft, especially for Trevor Lawrence when he took over in the national championship game. And I believe it was 2018, his freshman season. But yeah, Caleb Williams brings that. Currently, the Bears have 2 quarterbacks on the rosters, those being Tyson Bagent and Brett Rypien. Now, I don't think any of those guys are really starting caliber. Brett Rypien started a few games for my Broncos, and I believe he also started one with the Los Angeles Rams, as well as Tyson Bagent, I believe, started 2 games last season. And he looked decent, but nowhere near a starting caliber guy, in my opinion. Caleb Williams comes in, and he's going to hopefully be the Chicago Bears franchise quarterback of the future, because their best guy, in my opinion, from what I've heard from Bears fans, was Jay Cutler, was their best quarterback, I guess in recent memory at least. And my Broncos, we were the ones who drafted him. But hopefully Caleb Williams can solve the quarterback woes that have been going on in Chicago for quite some time. At number 2, I have the Washington Commanders selecting Jayden Daniels, the quarterback out of LSU. Now, in my opinion, Drake May is my number 2 quarterback in this year's class. I don't understand why a lot of people are dropping him on their boards. I think he could be considered a generational talent, but a lot of people are dropping him on their boards, and it's been rumored that It most likely is going to be Jaden Daniels. Could be Drake May, but I'm starting to lean more so that the Commanders are going to be selecting Jaden Daniels as their, I guess, the number 2 overall pick in the draft. Get their quarterback of the future. Currently, the quarterbacks that the Washington Commanders have on their roster are Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, and Jake Fromm. I think Jake Fromm is most likely going to be a practice squad guy if he is not cut. Jeff Driscoll could be a backup, but most likely practice squad guy. I keep trying to combine squad and guy together. Practice squad guy, and then I think Marcus Mariota will be the backup. Maybe start a few games above Jaden Daniels, but I think Jaden Daniels might start a majority of the games in the NFL. At number 3, I have the Minnesota Vikings trading up with the New England Patriots for their guy on Drake May. First things first, let's go ahead and let's discuss the trade from New England's end. New England could absolutely take a quarterback here, and if their guy is here, I expect them to take their quarterback because you're not going to be picking this high in the draft very often. Maybe they have their eyes on 2025 at a Shedeur Sanders, maybe even 2026 potentially at an Arch Manning. And so they're trading back here. They're going to acquire capital. They're going to acquire Minnesota's 2 first-round picks here so they can get the best player available. Maybe they target a quarterback later too. You'll have to see. But I could very well see New England trading back. If your guy's not there, you don't force a quarterback in this spot. You have to go and get your guy. And with Gerard Mayo taking over, maybe he wants to accumulate draft picks, pick up a lot more talent, and then get his quarterback either later on in this draft or in a future draft. Now for the Minnesota Vikings, they currently have Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, and Jaren Hall as their 3 quarterbacks. And, Sam Darnold could be your starter this season. If you're going for a guy next year, I don't think that's the plan. Nick Mullins is decent, was really good when Scangarello was the OC out in San Francisco. And then Jaren Hall was a rookie last season who they might have as their backup to develop or on their practice squad potentially, maybe the 3rd quarterback on the team. But they're getting my second best quarterback in this draft in Drake May to be their quarterback of the future. Now, moving on to the 4th pick, we actually have another trade, and it's my favorite team, the Denver Broncos, moving up for J.J. McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. As many of you guys know, if you have watched this channel a lot, I am a big J.J. McCarthy fan, and I love the upside that he brings. If you're interested to see why I love J.J. McCarthy as a prospect, there's 2 videos you can go and watch. There's my top 10 quarterback rankings, which was released back on April 11th. And yeah, you can go check that out if you're interested. Or there's one that was released a little bit before that, and I think it's titled the top 6 or something like that. The top 6 quarterbacks that I want the Denver Broncos to draft. It's titled something around then, but yeah, you can go see my reasons there. But to me, I think Sean Payton, he wants to get his guy. He's not afraid to mortgage the future. If you think the Zach Wilson trading a 6th round pick to bring in Zach Wilson, a guy with high upside, but if it doesn't work out, very little risk. If you think that takes us away from trading up for a quarterback, I think you're dead wrong. I think Sean Payton is going to go and get his guy and then have this high-end potential prospect in the wings. Now, I don't know if Zach Wilson's going to develop into anything crazy. Quite frankly, I don't really think so. But J.J. McCarthy, I believe in, and I think he fits Sean Payton's offense perfectly. And I think Sean Payton's going to go and get his guy. And Zach Wilson, when you're implementing Sean Payton's scheme, I feel like fits better as a backup than Jarrett Stidham does. So that is why I have the Broncos trading up to number 4 to grab J.J. McCarthy, our franchise quarterback of the future. Now, currently, we have Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, and Ben DiNucci on the roster, if you were wondering. Moving on to number 5, it is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers, and they are going to be selecting Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State. Now, to me, this was a little bit tough, not because Marvin Harrison isn't a great prospect, a generational receiver, one of the best we've seen in some time. Maybe you could throw Jamar Chase up there, but Jamar Chase also opted out the year after COVID, so he didn't play his final season at LSU, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great receiver. The reason why I struggle here is Jim Harbaugh, he runs a run-heavy offense. And I could very well see the Chargers targeting Joe Alt, one of the best offensive tackle prospects we have seen in some time. I would throw him up there with Penei Sewell. And if they want to go and develop the trenches, get another guy opposite of Rashawn Slater, they could absolutely do that. Now, both the wide receiver and the offensive tackle class is absolutely loaded. So they could, say here, take Marvin Harrison Jr. like they're doing in this mock and get a really solid tackle at the top end of the second round. Or they could take a top end tackle here and take a very solid tackle or a very solid receiver at the top end of the second round, maybe trade up for another receiver in the first. But in my opinion, I think if you take Marvin Harrison Jr. here and then get an offensive tackle later in the round, I like that better. And I hate that as a Broncos fan, but I'd rather have Marvin Harrison here in the first and then take a guy like a Tyler Guyton or, maybe a Troy Fautanu slips into the second round and get one of those guys to be the offensive tackle rather than it's tough though. Joe Alt is such a great prospect, but it's tough. It is tough. I went back and forth between these two. A wild card here could be Brock Bowers because he is just a versatile weapon. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be the pick here for the Los Angeles Chargers. Their current wide receivers are Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, Darius Davis, and Sime Fehoko. So, Quentin Johnston, first round pick from last year, got some upside. Joshua Palmer, I believe, was a third round pick a couple years ago. Darius Davis, I think he was picked last year, another TC receiver. And then I can't remember how they got Sime Fehoko. I don't remember if they drafted him or signed him, but I think it was a signing. But yeah, the Chargers here go Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. Jim Harbaugh gets someone he had to game plan against in college, but he's on his squad in the NFL. At number 6, the New York Giants are selecting Malik Nabers, wide receiver out of LSU. The top 4 guys are gone, and I don't see them taking Bo Nix here. Maybe they wait him out, hope to get him in the second round or trade back, but I think they're going to stay put and take Malik Nabers here because he absolutely is another one of those guys, maybe not generational per se, could be considered that if you want him to, but he is a really, really good wide receiver. There have been some character concerns coming out, and, I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to judge him based on that. But Malik Nabers is a fantastic receiver. If you want to go more in depth and get my thoughts on these players, I just did a daily upload series where I went over my top 10 players at every position. So if you want to see these guys and what I think of them and my evaluation, go and check those videos out. And also, spoiler alert, we don't have any more trade ups. I just did the Broncos and the Vikings. Obviously, there will be more trade ups in the NFL draft, I'd assume, but those are the only 2 I predicted. But yeah, Malik Nabers goes here to the Giants at number 6. I'm going to try and speed this up so it's a shorter mock draft for you to watch, and it's shorter for me to record so my voice doesn't get so scratchy and sore. But Giants' current wide receivers, and I kind of like their top 4 wide receivers that was listed on ESPN, at least for their depth chart, in Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and Isaiah McKenzie. I don't hate that, but I don't think a true number 1 guy is there. And Malik Nabers, if plugged in, he would be their number 1 receiver this season. At number 7, the Titans get an absolute gift in Joe Alt falling to them at 7. One of the best offensive tackle prospects I've ever seen, maybe of all time, the best. Not just one of, the best, because he is elite in pass blocking, he's elite in run blocking. He can do both. Now, if you look at their current offensive tackles, there's 3 of them. The Titans have Nicholas Petit-Frere, a offensive tackle out of Ohio State from a few years back. Dylan Raduns, a North Dakota State Bison, drafted a few years back. I believe he was a second round pick, maybe third round pick. And then they have Shadiq Charles as another guy. Not really a true number 1 offensive tackle on that roster, in my opinion. So the Titans here are grabbing that guy in Joe Alt to protect who hopefully is their franchise quarterback in Will Levis, but we will have to see on that. Moving to number 8, I have the Atlanta Falcons selecting Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Alabama. Just a purely athletic and speedster guy at the edge rusher position, going to win with his athleticism, honestly, his speed. If you look at the Atlanta Falcons' current edge rushers, it's James Smith-Williams, Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie, and D'Angelo Malone. Not really a whole bunch of guys I like. Not a number one edge rusher. I like Arnold Ebiketie on his upside to be a number two edge rusher, but Dallas Turner comes in and he is instantly their number one pass rusher, and he is going to get to the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. I feel like that's a fairly common pick here at 8 is to go Dallas Turner to the Atlanta Falcons. At number 9, the Chicago Bears pair up their new franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams with a new number one receiver. And I would say the top 3 receivers in this draft class in Rome Odunze here, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Malik Nabers. They are in the top tier, the elite tier, and then everyone else is under them. Of course, there's tiers ranked under them, but those are the top 3 guys. And Rome Odunze is absolutely fantastic. They pair Caleb Williams with a number 1 target. So, yeah, I mean, he will get the ball to them. Now, they do have some solid targets in Chicago. They have DJ Moore. They have Keenan Allen. Tyler Scott and Velus Jones are their top 4 receivers. They even got Cole Kmet at tight end. I could very well see them taking Brock Bowers here if they want to go for that versatile weapon, line him up as a tight end, and then maybe dress receiver a little bit later, because Keenan Allen is getting older. DJ Moore is still their number 1 right now, but adding Rome Odunze to that wide receiver core would be very scary, and he would give Caleb Williams an elite core of wide receivers to throw to. Moving on to the number 10 pick, that is going to belong to the New York Jets, and I do have them selecting Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. He's probably going to play tight end, but make no mistake, like Kyle Pitts in 2021, he's a versatile weapon. He can line up as a tight end, either as a tight end. He can line up on the line. He can line up spread out. He could line up in the slot if you need him to. And even in Georgia, they handed him into rounds, and he was just a weapon. He was an absolute weapon, and he's going to give Aaron Rodgers another guy to throw to. Of course, they got Garrett Wilson, a bunch of guys at the wide receiver position. Their current tight ends are Tyler Conklin, who's a little bit old, Jeremy Ruckert, young guy, Kenny Yeboah. I'll be honest, I've never heard of him. And then Zach Kuntz, who I believe was a 7th round pick last season, who has a high ceiling, but also has a very low floor. He's kind of a fun project. But Brock Bowers comes in there, and he's instantly their tight end 1. Moving to the 11th overall pick, it is the Patriots in the trade back with the Minnesota Vikings. And I have them selecting Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle out of Penn State. Look, their current tackles are Mike Onwenu, Chukwuma Okafor, Calvin Anderson, and Connor McDermott. Mike Onwenu is fairly decent, but I don't think they have that number 1 tackle. I really like Olu Fashanu. If he declared for last year's draft, he would have been the number 1 tackle off the board, in my opinion. I thought he was going to be the number 1 tackle off the board this year, but Joe Wall is just such an amazing prospect that he's the number 2 tackle, which is still really good. And he goes to the Patriots, and he's going to protect whoever their franchise quarterback is going to be wherever they get him. Stay tuned for this mock. But yeah, Olu Fashanu, absolute beast, and he's going to go, and he's going to be a starting tackle right away for the Patriots, and I think he will make an instant impact on that team. Moving to the 12th overall pick, when the Cardinals traded down with my Denver Broncos, I'm having them go Laiatu Latu, edge rusher out of UCLA, an absolute beast. Maybe a little bit of an injury concern, but there was also an injury concern with Jalen Phillips, and he's panned out very well for the Miami Dolphins. And he will be a force to be reckoned with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, they do have a second first-round pick to address other needs, and I'm just having them take the best player available, and if it's a need for them. As the Arizona Cardinals, they have Zaven Collins as an edge rusher. It looks like they're kind of going the Minkah Fitzpatrick, Baron Browning route with Zaven Collins, as he was an inside backer, and it looks as they're now converting him to edge. They also have B.J. Ojulari, who was a 2nd-round pick either last year, 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. They have L.J. Collier and Cameron Thomas, who's still a young guy who was picked either, I think it was like 2021, 22. But young guys, not a true number 1 edge, and Laiatu Latu comes in to affect the passer and obviously be an instant impact guy for the Los Angeles Chargers. Or not the Los Angeles Chargers, the Arizona Cardinals. I am sorry if I said Los Angeles Chargers. I obviously misspoke there, but for the Arizona Cardinals, Laiatu Lautu comes in, and he will be an instant impact edge rusher. At 13, I have the Raiders selecting Quinyon Mitchell. Maybe they take a quarterback here, but I think they might wait. The top 4 guys are off the board, and I feel like all the quarterback-needy teams have really grabbed a quarterback at this point, except for the New England Patriots, and I think they can afford to wait to the second round because my Broncos, we can't. We don't have a second-round pick, but the Raiders might be able to find value later, and so I'm having them go in Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. Now, Quinyon Mitchell is not my number 1 corner. He's my number 2 corner, but I think that he's most likely going to be the guy the Raiders draft, just the super athletic guy at the cornerback position. Their current corners are Nate Hobbs, who is really solid, but I like him more in the slot than as an outside guy. They got Jack Jones, Jacorian Bennett, who I believe they spent a 5th-round pick on last year, and they also have Brandon Faison. Not a true number 1 guy in my opinion. I know I'm saying that a lot and I'm sounding like a broken record, but I think Quinyon Mitchell can kind of be that guy. I think it can be the Devin Witherspoon, the Sauce Gardner, the Pat Surtain, goes in there, is the number 1 corner and locks guys down. So yeah, Quinyon Mitchell, great player. Not my number 1 corner, but I feel like he's a lot of players, or not a lot of players, but there's been a lot of guys on YouTube who have them as their number 1 corner, and I feel like he might be the number 1 corner on a lot of players, or not a lot of GM's big boards. Personally, it's Terrion Arnold for me, but I think the Raiders most likely select Quinyon Mitchell here. Next up, the Saints at 14 are selecting a tackle in Talise Fuaga. And this is an absolute steal in my opinion. I think he could absolutely be looking back at it, I do think it's a steal. I was going to say something, not going to say it because Fashanu went at 11 here. But I think this is an excellent pick for the Saints. They get the 3rd best tackle, and it fits a need. Currently, they have Ryan Ramczyk as their number 1 tackle, which he's great. One of the best tackles in the entire NFL. But when I was checking, it looked like he was hurt. And so I can't remember. There might have been news that he's going to miss the entire season. I can't remember. But you're picking Talise Fuaga here. Trevor Penning was a 1st-round pick back in, 2022. I don't know how well it's panned out for him then. They also have Landon Young and Alisa Mecca Udo. But, yeah, those 2 other guys don't know how they're going to play. And if Ramczyk is out, you get Talise Fuaga to plug in there and play. And even if Ramczyk is playing, I don't remember how well Trevor Penning is doing so far in his NFL career, who, by the way, his brother's coming out in next year's draft. But Talise Fuaga, excellent pick for the Saints, and it is a position that they needed, and they get a very talented guy here at 14. At 15, I have the Indianapolis Colts selecting my number 1 corner, but I feel like he's number 2 on a lot of people's boards, and that's going to be Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. Currently, the Indianapolis Colts have Kenny Moore, Juju Brents, which I believe is Julius Brents, who they drafted a few years ago, Jalen Jones, and Dallas Flowers. I like Kenny Moore. I think he's a solid slot guy. I like Juju Brents as a number 2 corner, but as a true number 1 corner, Terrion Arnold can be that guy. He has the upside to be that true number 1 corner, and that's who I have the Indianapolis Colts selecting here at 15. Once again, I'm trying to speed this up as fast as possible. At 16, I have the Seattle Seahawks selecting J.C. Latham, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Another Alabama guy and another really good offensive tackle. Their current offensive tackles are Charles Cross, who they traded, or when they traded Russell Wilson to my Broncos, they used that 9th overall pick on Charles Cross. I think he's been solid. He's not the issue here. Abraham Lucas, they selected in that same draft. I don't know how they feel about him. Maybe they like him, maybe they don't, but getting J.C. Latham here to have the bookends of Charles Cross and J.C. Latham, that would be a scary tandem. And then their other guys are Stone Forsythe and George Fant. Can't remember if I said that already. But yeah, here at 16, the Seahawks are taking J.C. Latham. At 17, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I'm interested in this one. I've seen a couple Jaguars fans on Twitter, or X now, say that they really wanted to trade up for a wide receiver, and I don't know if that's the consensus or those are maybe a couple outlier fans, because I could honestly see them taking Byron Murphy the second here, the defensive lineman out of Texas. But I had them grabbing my number 4 receiver in this class in Brian Thomas Jr. to add to a receiving core of Christian Kirk, who really proved me wrong after they signed him away from Arizona, Gabe Davis, who they just signed, Zay Jones, and Parker Washington, who I liked coming out a few drafts ago. A number 1 guy, though? I don't know. Brian Thomas has the upside to be a number 1 guy, maybe a number 2 guy, but Brian Thomas going to the Jaguars here, that adds to a really good receiving core for Trevor Lawrence. Here at 18, I do have the Bengals selecting Byron Murphy here out of Texas, so they're thankful the Jags don't select him here. And he goes to a defensive line group with B.J. Hill, Sheldon Rankins, Jay Tufele, who I kind of forgot about, who's a really good prospect who I liked going into the 2021 draft. And then they also have Zach Carter, but Byron Murphy there would easily be the best guy, eating up blocks, stopping the run, providing interior pass rush. That's what he does best. I kind of just described their job, but he does it all really well. And so the Bengals get a really good pick here, the best defensive lineman in this draft in Byron Murphy. Next up at number 19, the Rams are ecstatic to see Jared Verse fall to them at 19. Their current edge rushers are Byron Young, who they selected last year. Then they have Michael Hoecht, Nick Hampton, and Keir Thomas. Those last 3 guys, I don't even know if I remember hearing of, which I guess call me a casual if you want, but they don't really have a number 1 guy. Byron Young I believe this is the one from Tennessee, because there was 2 last year, the one from Alabama and the one from Tennessee. I like the one from Tennessee more. I thought he was a little bit better, but I think he's a number 2 guy. Don't think they have the number 1 guy there, and Jared Verse has the upside to be that number 1 guy, one of the best edge rushers and players in this draft, and he falls all the way to the late teens here at 19. This would be a great pick for the Los Angeles Rams, and they're ecstatic to see him here at 19. At 20, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting Amarius Mims, offensive tackle out of Georgia, and I have them pairing up Broderick Jones, who was their first-round pick last year out of Georgia, and Amarius Mims. I have them just essentially reuniting, building the 2 Georgia offensive tackles at the end. That would be kind of funny. Just they team up, the former offensive tackle teammates. They're going to be in the same room on the same team, same college, same NFL team. That'd be an awesome. That'd be a cool story. But yeah, Amarius Mims was my best offensive tackle available, and so I have the Steelers selecting him here at 20. Their other current offensive tackles, of course, like I mentioned, Broderick Jones, Dan Moore Jr., Dylan Cook, and Kellen Diesch. Those are their other guys. Not really a whole fan of the other 2. Dan Moore's all right, but, if they get Amarius Mims, I would start him over Dan Moore. Next up, the defensive line, I kind of spoiled the next pick, but it's the Miami Dolphins. I have them selecting Jerzon, a.k.a. Johnny Newton, out of Illinois. They lost Christian Wilkins, and their current defensive line is Jonathan Harris, Benito Jones, and Zach Sealer. I can't remember. Who else did they have? They had another guy who I thought was decent. I can't remember. I didn't write him down, but I do believe they need to improve that defensive interior, because their edge rushers, they got Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips. They're pretty set on the edge, but as an interior rusher and interior defender, losing Christian Wilkins sucks, and that hurts. So I have them going Jerzon Newton out of Illinois right here. For a majority of the year, he was the number 1 defensive lineman in this draft, but here he falls to 21. Byron Murphy, it's Byron Murphy, right? Yeah, Byron Murphy. He goes a little bit earlier, so he falls to 21, and the Dolphins are able to improve that defensive interior. Next up, at 22, I have the Philadelphia Eagles selecting Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback out of Alabama. First thing I want to say, I love Kool-Aid McKinstry. A couple months ago, I think back in December, January, I was doing some mock drafts, and I think it was actually November. I think it was November, because Russell Wilson was still starting for the Broncos, and I was looking at guys who the Broncos could draft, because obviously we weren't looking for a quarterback at that time. And so I said, I like Kool-Aid McKinstry. And every mock that I looked at and every mock that I tried to do, Kool-Aid McKinstry was not available. He was going top 5, top 7, and now he's fallen to 22. I am a big fan of Kool-Aid McKinstry. He could honestly argue and challenge for my number 1 corner spot. I think he is insanely talented, and he falls to the oh my goodness. I kind of just spoiled the next pick, so sorry, but he falls here to the Eagles at 22. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Kool-Aid McKinstry. The Eagles are looking to trade up for a corner. There's been rumors of that, and they're calling my Broncos. And so if we aren't able to get J.J. McCarthy, which I think we will, I think Sean Payton's going to trade it for his guy, like I mentioned earlier. I could see us trading back here with the Eagles, but they get, in my opinion, an insanely talented corner because that looks like the position they're targeting here at 22. And yeah, it's Kool-Aid McKinstry. Their other corners are James Bradbury and Darius Slay, 2 really good corners, but they're getting on the older side, so that's what the Eagles like to do. You know, Fletcher Cox was getting on the older side a few years ago. They selected, what was his name? It's not Jordan Davis. And they also selected Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith for Brandon Graham, getting on the older side. So they like to get this youth movement coming in, and Kool-Aid McKinstry does just that. And their other corners are Avonte Maddox and Zach McPherson. Moving on to number 23 with the Patriots. You guys saw it spoiled, but I have them selecting Bo Nix, quarterback out of Oregon. If Bo Nix is their guy, easily they could trade down. Again, I talked a lot about the Patriots in the trade, so I'm not going to go too in depth of that again, but they get the best player available at 11 in Olu Fashanu. They fix up their offensive line, then they get their quarterback of the future right here. So they get 2 first-round picks because of the trade with Minnesota. And so Bo Nix here, their franchise guy, they got him a franchise tackle. And then with how stacked of a wide receiver draft class it is, they can go and they can pick up a wide receiver in the second. And they probably picked up more picks than just the 2 firsts from the trade up from Minnesota. So they could get Bo Nix, a starting tackle in Olu Fashanu, and then a wide receiver later. So I like this for the Patriots. If their guy isn't there in the top 3, which again, if it is, you absolutely take him. But if it's not, I love this trade down scenario for the Patriots and the Patriot fans. Of course, their current quarterbacks are Jacoby Brissett, Bailey Zappi, and Nathan Rourke, who was a rookie last year, I believe. Moving on to number 24, I have the Dallas Cowboys selecting Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas. Now, Worthy is not my best receiver available at this point. It's Adonai Mitchell, his teammate. But I think adding Xavier Worthy to the Cowboys offense, that would be insane. Of course, Dak Prescott, it is what it is. You guys have your opinions on him, I'm sure, already. But having CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks as the 2 outside guys, and then having Xavier Worthy in the slot, or heck, maybe you line up Xavier Worthy on the outside, that would be insane. That would be a speedy team, and just giving Dak a deep threat, the fastest receiver in the class. Now, I'm not as high on Worthy because he has had drop issues in the past, whether that's been because of a broken hand, concentration drops, whatever. He does drop some passes, which I'm not a fan of, but he was the fastest man ever at the combine. And so Xavier Worthy here is going to the Cowboys at 24. Of course, their other receivers are CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, and Kavontae Turpin. I really like Tolbert and his upside, by the way. I'm excited to see what he can do. Hopefully he gets still some chances in Dallas if this is the route they go. Next up at 25, I have the Green Bay Packers selecting Graham Barton. And to me, he can play guard or Duke. I have him listed as an interior guy. I think he slides to guard. But in this scenario, I think the Packers draft him and they play him at tackle. Because the next best pure tackle on my board is Troy Fautanu, who I like, but he's kind of a fringe first round, early second round guy for me on my board. So Graham Barton, they draft him. He can play offensive tackle. And if it doesn't work out at tackle, they can shift him inside and play him at guard. He's kind of that Peter Skoronski type in which the Titans took last year. Love Graham Barton and his upside. Could play tackle, can play guard. Just kind of pick your poison. I have him as a guard, but could easily see him playing the tackle here, or playing tackle here for the Green Bay Packers. Their current offensive tackles are Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, who I liked coming out of the draft a few years ago, Andre Dillard, who signed a big contract with the Titans after playing for the Eagles, drafted by the Eagles, signed a big contract with the Titans, didn't play well, got cut, was signed by the Packers, and then they also have Luke Tenuta as another tackle. Next up at 26, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selecting Chop Robinson, edge rusher out of Penn State. Their current edge rushers, I don't see that number one guy there. I see a bunch of complementary pieces, solid number two guys, solid depth guys. But their current edge rushers are Yaya Diaby, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who was their first round pick in 2021. They also have former Bronco and Randy Gregory and Anthony Nelson as their top four edge rushers. To me, Chop Robinson goes in there, and he could be their number one edge rusher right away. I think he has an upside and eventually will be the number one edge rusher for them. But, he could go in there and be the number two guy with Yaya Diaby or Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, or maybe it's a three-man rush where they rotate. So it is what it is, but I love the upside that Chop Robinson brings. He is my 19th best player in this draft if you went back and looked at my top 20 guys in the NFL draft. But yeah, he goes here to the Buccaneers, and they get a very stud edge rusher. Maybe won't be elite right away like Leautu, Dallas Turner, or Jared Verse, but has the upside to potentially be the best edge rusher out of this entire class. Moving to 27, like I mentioned earlier, the Cardinals get Adonai Mitchell, my number 5 receiver in this class. They went best player available when they decided to trade back with my Broncos from 4 to 12. They went Leautu, best player available, helps out their defense, helps out their pass rush. And then here, they help out Kyler Murray by getting him a weapon in Adonai Mitchell, who I am such a fan of. I think he's a little bit more raw. Played a decent amount at Georgia, not a whole lot. Really got his first full year at Texas this year after he transferred. Or he played at Georgia his first 2 seasons. Then at the start of last season, he transferred to Texas, had a great year, and that was his most productive full year. And so, I love the upside that Adonai Mitchell brings. He provides a weapon, a true number 1 receiver, in my opinion, for Kyler Murray. Their other receivers are Michael Wilson, who I like, who they drafted out of Stanford last year. Then they have Greg Dortch, Chris Moore, and Zach Pascal. Decent guys, but not great. So they add here in a stacked wide receiver class. They get one of the best in Adonai Mitchell here at 27. At 28, the Buffalo Bills select Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. Now, any of these teams, there's a couple more teams that I have taking wide receivers still in this draft. Any of these teams at the back end could easily trade up and try and jump each other to get their receiver that they want. But obviously, I'm not doing really any trades except for those first 2 at picks 3 and 4 with the Vikings and my Broncos, respectfully. Now, Ladd McConkey is a guy who, to me, he's a second-round pick, but he is an early second-round pick. And I wouldn't mind him going in the late first, but to me, I think he's going to be like he should be one of the first few picks off the board in the second round. But to me, here he goes at the end of the first because it's a very deep draft class. Could easily go in the first round, and I wouldn't mind that. Second round guy for me, early second round, like I mentioned. But with how many wide receivers need to go off the board and how deep this draft class is, yeah, we could see a lot here. The Bills' current wide receivers are Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Andy Isabella, and KJ Hamler after trading Stephon Diggs away, not re-signing Darius Davis. They're in need for a wide receiver, and I could absolutely see them moving up in the draft to try and get their guy, maybe trying to jump the Cardinals to get Adonai Mitchell. But right now, they add Ladd McConkey, who is still a great add for the Buffalo Bills. At 29, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson. He had an absolutely fantastic combine, and obviously you don't judge off the combine alone, but his weigh-in, his weight, that concerned me a little bit. That kind of scared me. That dropped him, honestly, from my cornerback 2 at the time all the way down to my cornerback 4, which isn't a huge drop, but that weigh-in did scare me. But he has a super athletic, super fast corner, not going to get burned by many receivers, and the Detroit Lions are adding him here. Jeff Okudah didn't work out, their former number 3 overall pick. Their current cornerbacks are Carlton Davis, Amik Robertson, Emmanuel Mosley, and Kendall Vidder. Not really feeling that. So they get the best corner available at this point in the draft in Nate Wiggins out of Clemson to add to that cornerback room. Moving to number 30, I have the Baltimore Ravens selecting Troy Fautanu, offensive tackle out of Washington. Now, their current tackles are Ronnie Stanley, who is solid. He's their number one tackle. They have Daniel Faalele, who I really wanted in 2022. He's this massive, like 6'7", 6'8" offensive tackle out of Minnesota. Actually, I can't remember. I think he was taller than that, maybe. I think it was tall. I want to kind of look up his height now because he was a super tall corner who I really wanted the Broncos to draft in 2022. I wanted him in, like, honestly, the second round back then. And he fell all the way to, I think it was like the fourth or fifth round back in 2022. But I really wanted him, and I thought he would have been a steal. Here he is. He's 6'8". He's 6'8", but still a massive tackle. I don't really know if it's worked out. Ravens fans, you'll have to let me know. Then they also have Josh Jones and Patrick McCarry. But Troy Fautanu comes in, and he and Ronnie Stanley would be an excellent 1-2 punch at the offensive tackle position. Next up, at 31, I have the San Francisco 49ers selecting Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. Another top guy here. It's crazy. You know, obviously they got Debo. They got Brandon Ayuk for now. We'll see if he gets moved at the NFL draft. I feel like for the past few years, the Niners have had guys who they try and trade on draft day. You know, this year, it's Brandon Ayuk. A few seasons ago, it was Debo Samuel. A few seasons ago, it was DeForest Buckner. But the other guys are Juwan Jennings and Ronnie Bell. And if you lose Ayuk, I would like to see another guy next to Debo out there. And, well, obviously you would get another guy. But I'd like to see you address it early because you have a late second-round pick, obviously. Well, if you have a second-round pick, it's going to be later. It's going to be towards the end. And Troy Franklin, he's an excellent guy. Maybe more of a round 2 guy, early round 2 guy, but I don't mind taking him here in the first round at 31. 49ers get their guy at wide receiver. And then to close it out at pick 32, it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Keon Coleman, who I love Keon Coleman. He was my number 4 receiver before entering the combine. Didn't have an impressive combine, and I know you don't judge everything based on the combine, but wasn't super impressive, so he has dropped down my board. But if he can get the upside, if he can play with the speed he played at Florida State, this could be an absolute steal for the Kansas City Chiefs. And that pains me to say because Keon Coleman is a beast, and I think he can be a beast in the NFL. We'll just have to see what happens. We will have to see what happens. Keon Coleman, 6'4", ran a 4.6, which isn't great, but if he can get to back to what he was, or I guess not back because he didn't go anywhere, but if he can play how he played at Florida State this past year and at Michigan State the years before, excellent pick for the Chiefs, and that really hurts me to say. The Chiefs' current wide receivers are Rashee Rice. We'll see what happens to him. Marquise Brown, who I do like Marquise Brown. I don't think he's really a number 1 guy in the NFL. Maybe you could consider him a fringe number 1 receiver, but I think he'll be solid for the Chiefs playing with Patrick Mahomes. They got Justin Watson, who's been meh, and then Kadarius Toney, who really struggled last season. But Keon Coleman, excellent receiver here, and I think this would be an excellent pick for the Chiefs, as much as it pains me to say that. Now, we're not ending the video here. I'm going to do kind of a quick recap of the first round, and here's the breakdown. I had 22 offensive players go and 10 defensive players go in this mock draft. Here is the breakdown. There was 5 quarterbacks, no running backs, 9 receivers, 1 tight end, 6 tackles, and 1 interior guy, which I did mark as Graham Barton, but I do think he'll play tackle. So if you want to technically say 7 tackles and no interior, you could absolutely say that. And then as for the defensive players, there's 2 interior defensive linemen, 4 edge rushers, 0 linebackers, 4 corners, and 0 safeties. Now, in terms of the colleges, there was 10 SEC players, 5 Big Ten players, 3 Big 12 players, 5 ACC players, 7 Pac-12 players, and 2 non-Power 5 guys. And this is as of last season. So Oregon, Washington, all of them are still in the Pac-12. Oklahoma, Texas, they're still in the Big 12. That's just essentially what I'm getting at. It's last year's conferences. So for the SEC, there was 3 colleges: Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. Alabama had 4 players with Dallas Turner, Terrion Arnold, J.C. Latham, and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Georgia had 3 in Brock Bowers, Amarius Mims, and Ladd McConkey. And LSU had 3 in Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr. The Big Ten had 4 schools in Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Illinois. Penn State had Olufashanu and Chop Robinson. Michigan had my guy in J.J. McCarthy, who I hope the Broncos we go and get. Ohio State had one guy in Marvin Harrison Jr., the elite wide receiver, one of the best prospects we've ever seen. And then Illinois had Jerzan, a.k.a. Johnny Newton. The Big 12 had 1 school, and it was Texas, with all 3 players in Byron Murphy, Adonai Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy. The ACC had 4 schools. North Carolina had Drake May, Duke had Graham Barton, Florida State had Jared Verse and Keon Coleman, and Clemson had Nate Wiggins. The Pac-12 had 5 different schools. USC had 1 guy, and of course the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. Washington had 2 guys in Rome Odunze and Troy Fautanu. UCLA had 1 guy in Laiatu Lautu. Oregon State had 1 guy in Talise Fuaga, and Oregon had 2 guys in Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. Finally, the non-Power 5, Notre Dame had 1 guy in Joe Alt, and Toledo had 1 guy in Quinion Mitchell. But that is going to be my mock draft, my final mock draft. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you disagree, please do so respectfully. But anyways, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Draft day is almost here, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.